Socks are the #1 most requested item at homeless shelters. Underwear second, and shirts are third. At Bombas, socks were first, made with comfortable details for everyday wearing. Then underwear, and shirts too, all designed to perfectly fit. At Bombas, every item you purchase means you're donating an essential clothing item to someone in need. One comfortable clothing item for you, one donated to someone in need. Bombas, comfort for all. Get 20% off your purchase at bombas.com/comfy.
10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hychak. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hychak. Tonight we got a great show on tap for you guys. This will be a lot of fun, and we're having a great guest on, author Mike Clelland. Look at that. Doug?
That's pretty good. I'm proud of you.
I know. Who will be discussing an amazing connection of owls and as messengers and the UFO abduction phenomena. So you want to hang around Bomb the Hour for that one. Be a lot of fun. Be very interesting. I think he's going to blow the doors off a lot of folks here. But, you know, I got to talk to you, Doug. Are you snowed in or snowed up or what's going on your end? I know I'm so sick of the winter I could puke.
It's snowing.
Yeah.
Snowing and blowing, and it's cold, and
yeah.
we're in the thick of it.
Yeah. Do you like this time of year? Are you a snow lover or are you a snow hater?
Kidding. I'm a freaking Bahamas guy.
That lives in Minnesota.
Yeah, definitely a Bahamas guy. I'm the margarita man. I'm Jimmy Buffett. Yeah, that's me, and I'm in the wrong place, but I do it for my kids. I'm here for my kids.
Yeah. Well, that's a noble reason.
I wake up in the morning. I wake up in the morning and I go, I'm here for my kids. I'm here for my kids.
That's a noble reason to stay around in the frozen tundra.
Yeah, exactly.
Is for your kids. Yeah, same here. I got family that keeps me in the frozen locker room thing here. That's we call Minnesota.
It's a wholesome place to live. And
it's all right.
When spring comes, oh my God, do we appreciate it.
You know, our summers, though, thank God, are phenomenal.
Yeah, they are.
You know, we have great summers, unless you're in October at a Bigfoot festival, and it's like being in the back jungles of Belize, going on a 20-mile hike with a man that doesn't know how to stop.
Yeah, anyhow.
Yeah.
So our guest tonight, Mike Clelland, it really should be a fascinating conversation because I'm personally interested in what he has to say. I grew up hearing a very weird owl story from my father and my brother. Actually, and my mom too was in the car. So, and I can tell the story now, or should I save it for when Mike comes on?
Oh, jeez, I'm torn. Me
too.
You could tell it twice.
Well, look, Mike's he'll have his own story. So let me just tell my story. Okay. So they were driving to South Dakota, to the Black Hills, was their destination. Then they were passing through the Black Hills at about 4 a.m, right?
Okay.
And, my dad, he was kind of a trooper when it come to road trips. He liked to drive. And trust me, he would drive me I would take road trips with him. And we would drive straight through. Like one time I went to Missouri with him, and he was in his own car because he had his girlfriend with. And I've got, like my son, Alex, he's like a month old. And Alex, he was like a month old. And in those days, I just put him in a laundry basket.
Yeah.
with pillows. I mean,
so we're talking what, early 90s, late 80s?
Oh my God, in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, make a long story short, my dad drove me into the ground. So I get how he ended up leaving Minneapolis and then driving straight through to South Dakota without stopping. That's my dad.
Jeez.
So we had my brother Johnny and my brother James in the car, and my mom, but Johnny was asleep. And so they're in the South Dakota, and apparently James was awake. And they were talking, and they see two eyes at the side of the road, right?
Huh, yeah.
And they look at it, and right where the two eyes were, a rabbit jumps out. Okay, fine. He slows down, but not, like slam the brakes on or anything.
Yeah.
But he slowed down. The rabbit crosses the road safe, and right where the rabbit was, an owl took off. Exactly where the rabbit was, which is
really,
you would think the owl would have been killing the rabbit.
Yeah.
But then, within one split second from where the owl took off, a pinwheel-shaped UFO took off in a very pinwheel motion of kind of like one weighted end.
Yeah.
And started spinning and going up, but it hit the windshield. My dad's car collided with the UFO and broke his windshield.
What?
And they, of course, pulled over, and James and my mom and my dad both describe seeing this pinwheel go up, 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 up in the moonlight. But what was the owl doing there? So if there was an owl and a rabbit and a UFO all within the same exact little spot, what were they all doing?
Yeah. Sounds like
it
you gave
just,
a bad joke. An owl, rabbit, and UFO walk into a bar. Yeah, what were they all doing there?
Exactly. But you can imagine hearing that story at probably about 5 years old. And that just haunting even me, thinking, oh my God, And then growing up and he, asking him to tell it again and, tell me this. I swear to God, once a year I'd ask him to tell me this story.
That's craziness.
It had an effect on me. There's no doubt. Because my dad didn't have a lot of, weird stories. That was like one of the only ones, maybe.
Socks are the #1 most requested item at homeless shelters. Underwear second, and shirts are third. At Bombas, socks were first, made with comfortable details for everyday wearing. Then underwear, and shirts too, all designed to perfectly fit. At Bombas, every item you purchase means you're donating an essential clothing item to someone in need. One comfortable clothing item for you, one donated to someone in need. Bombas, comfort for all. Get 20% off your purchase at bombas.com/comfy.
Drew and Jonathan Scott here to tell you that with the American Family Insurance Home Quote tool, you can easily design a customized policy for your dream home right from the comfort of your couch.
And fun paint fact, there are over 150 shades of white, like Hello White, Fluffy Bunny, Eggshell.
They get it. Explore the AmFam Home Quote tool at amfam.com/home to learn more about your policy coverage options. American Family Insurance. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly.
American Family Mutual Insurance Company SI and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin. Products not available in every state.
Was that?
That's crazy, man. That is crazy.
So that might be so there's no doubt that owl or the UFO was interacting with the owl.
There was something going on.
There was something going on. Or then I thought, well, maybe the UFO was doing experiments on the owl and the rabbit. Or maybe, your imagination can kind of go crazy, right?
Maybe the UFO was the owl.
No, because the owl took off in a different direction, and this other thing was about 10 feet in diameter, and it was like they can only describe it like a pinwheel.
But your dad ran into the UFO.
Oh, it hit the windshield, bro.
Smashing his windshield.
Yeah, just put a crack in. They collide with it.
Wow.
And so all those things. Can you imagine? You're just, everything's just normal, and you're talking to your son. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose.
Jeez.
4 a.m, yeah.
Man, could you imagine that conversation afterwards? I mean, they had to pull over. I'm like, what the hell did we just experience?
Yeah, it puzzled my dad forever. He never got over it.
I would imagine he didn't.
And so to this day, I'm always looking out for another sighting of a weird pinwheel type, with like a weight on one end where it went up, but they said it was like it had uneven orbit, and it went off. Yeah. Here's what's really interesting. They like even the the new footage released by the government shows that one that they had a lock on, all of a sudden turning sideways.
Yeah.
Because my dad described, and so did my brother and my mom, described it as sideways, as vertical.
Jeez.
As it went up, not like a flying saucer, horizontal.
Yeah.
But it turned on its side and then went up with this weird pinwheel type motion. Yep.
And this, of course, like you said, I think you said this anyway, it was in the middle of the night.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. Wow.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That is crazy.
So, what else? Oh, I was just reading the news, and it said, watch out, because we might be experiencing the world's first twin-demic, with two.
Yeah.
Have you heard that term, twin-demic?
Yeah. What's going on there?
With the flu and the coronavirus.
Oh, yeah.
And then apparently they found some hybrid virus that's, they call it Flurona.
Oh, God.
Swear to God.
Really?
I swear to God, I read that. I did not imagine that in the paper, Flurona. And I'm like, oh, my God. So here we go again.
Here we go again.
Twindemic and Flurona.
Jeez.
Okay,
It's never
so
gonna
let's
end.
change the subject. So one of the things that brought back a lot of memories for me a couple of years ago was somebody in our household bought a pack of Oreos.
Oh, yeah, good old Oreos.
But I haven't eaten an Oreo cookie in 30 years. And I
They're
thought,
still good.
and I thought, and I looked at them, they're sitting on the counter, and I'm going, kind of rubbing my chin, going, do I crack that, that icebreaker? Or do I just steer clear? Because I've steered clear for 30 years. And the reason I steered clear is because one time somebody told me, well, that's just lard and powdered sugar.
Yeah, but it's tasty lard and powdered sugar.
But that turned me off so much when he told me that. Made me think, about food ingredients. This is back 30 years ago. People didn't think much about that.
Yeah.
And it turned me off so much I never touched one since. But here it was, sitting on the thing, and of course I broke down. I had one.
Well,
And of course, then another one and another one.
Well, once you're in, you might as well be
I was in, and I'm like, I ate a whole row, right? The whole row. But I did. But listen, Joel, I swear to God, too, I scraped the white crap off. I had one with the white stuff, the cream filling, and then I scraped the other ones off, right? Because I'm thinking, well, it's better for you, right? So then I'm thinking, okay, what's the deal with Oreos? Because I remember reading about their logo, the one on the cookie.
Yep.
It's got like a line and then two lines on top.
Yep.
Which is really weird. It's kind of like a UFO with an antenna on it. I mean, that's kind of what it is. And I thought, well, I wonder what that is. I couldn't remember the conspiracy theory.
The reason behind it, yeah.
I couldn't remember, so I started reading about it. And then I learned all these weird facts about Oreos. It was kind of mind-blowing. And I wrote some of them down only because they're kind of insane. Literally, they're insane.
That's overthinking the Oreo logo.
I know that, but that's the way I am. That's the way I roll.
Yeah.
So, okay. So the original Oreo sandwich was apparently developed in 1921, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's called the Oreo biscuit at that time.
Good
So
stuff.
it's developed in 1921, and then in 1948 the name was changed to the Oreo cream sandwich. That's all cool.
Yeah.
Right? And then the chocolate sandwich cookie in 1974. But really the cookie has stayed the same. It really has.
It's been the same Oreo since the
'Cause
beginning.
When I tried that one after 30 years, I mean, it was instant. There was no memory loss.
It brought you back some great memories, didn't it?
You know,
Eating that Oreo, probably get yourself a big glass of milk.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. So, if you take every Oreo sold since 1921, and I couldn't comprehend this, and you put them like next to each other, you could go around the globe 341
Oh,
times.
you know you could, yes.
And I'm like,
Yes.
oh my God, I never But we don't think about these commodity things, these products.
No, because we love them.
I know, but 341 times around the earth? That's crazy. And they sell 50 million packages a day. How would you like to have a little bit of taste of that?
Jeez. Well, yeah.
A profit. Maybe
yeah,
1%.
Yeah. Just 1 week's worth of profits.
So everybody out there listening, if you're going to invent something, invent a commodity item. Okay.
Right? Something that it can become. Because here's the thing. Not only, do we love the Oreos because they're the Oreos, but we grew up with them. So what they do is they bring back better times in our mind, too.
Yeah. Yep. So Sam J. Porcello, also they called him Mr. Oreo, is the principal scientist at Nabisco who invented the creamy filling or perfected it.
Yeah.
Right? So, obviously they got it perfected. They ended up getting 5 patents on the cookie. Can you imagine?
Really?
Patent on a cookie. Yeah.
Did you ever look up the ingredients of what that filling truly is?
Oh, man. I went down the Oreo rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it didn't let me down. The more I dug, the more I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So then I started looking at the symbol, because it's really weird. If you really look at an Oreo cookie, the texture, the diamonds, it's got like clover leaves,
sure,
or shamrocks, and it's got these or they could be Maltese crosses, dots and dashes, and then it's got other symbolism in it, and it's weird.
They're wonderful. They're wonderful.
But don't you think that texture adds to the flavor? I guess
it does. Yeah, I think that every part of that Oreo that we have today has been engineered throughout the years for maximum eatability, maximum love, maximum everything you can think of about Oreo. It's made, even the way they come apart.
Right. Oh yeah, because they're fun to they're fun because you can twist. Right. And then it's kind of like you could make wishes, like which side is the frosting going to end up on? And will it break? The frosting end up on both sides or one?
Yep.
And then I started thinking, oh, what that guy told me, was that true? And so I looked that up. Yeah, it was made of pig lard, right? And then in 1997, they switched it to vegan.
See, look at that. It's not bad for you anymore.
By using vegetable oil, I would imagine, like Crisco type.
Sure. And now it's good for you.
Vegetable grease or whatever. So anyhow, but the other thing I found, I thought, oh my God, there's like a dude in prison because he leaked the Oreo formula, the ingredients, to a Chinese company, and the guy sold it. Take a guess how much he sold it for. The ingredients.
Oh,
just he gave him.
If you're going to risk everything, so you'd have to research what the risk is.
I know.
I would say he sold it for $2 million.
No, you're not even close, dude. Okay.
Really?
Think about it. It's probably, and I'm just guessing, it's probably 10 ingredients, right? 20 maybe. But it's just a little recipe. He sold it for $28 million.
Oh my good Lord.
To the Chinese whatever. Some
so they too can enjoy the sweet Oreos.
So he ends up landing a 15-year prison sentence. And this happened in, I believe, in 2014, yes.
So it wasn't that long ago.
He's still in prison.
Yeah, he's still in jail. He's still in prison doing time.
I wonder if he's got any Oreos to eat in there.
I don't know. I bet you maybe they give him a box of Oreos as a joke.
Well, the other weird thing is, like, the Oreo cookie company in Nabisco that makes the Oreo cookie, you would never guess how big their bakery is.
Oh, it's got to be huge.
It's 1,800,000 square foot.
Could you imagine having that as your workshop?
That's the bakery.
Do you know what I mean? Could you imagine having that big of a building like for your company?
Oh, could you? Yeah, but could you imagine how good it smells in there?
Oh, my gosh. I would, yeah.
And they employ 1,200 people, right? It's the largest bakery in the world, bar none. They produce 320 million pounds per day.
Really?
Or no, annually. 320 million pounds annually in that bakery. And that includes, of course, Chips Ahoy, which is not a bad cookie.
No, Chips Ahoy is good. Chips Ahoy is good, but it's no Oreo.
You got Ritz crackers, Teddy Grahams they own, Triscuit, Fig Newtons,
Oh, yeah.
Wheat Thins, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot of cool products. We all grew up on. Okay. So So the guy got 28 million. That didn't work out. Remind me to never give a recipe to anybody.
No, don't do that. No.
Okay.
No.
So what else here? They also, Nabisco had the tallest building in the world at one point.
Really?
Oreo cookie, yeah, in Chicago.
Wow. Damn.
I thought that's interesting.
I mean, but think about commodity, like you said, something that is going to resonate with the masses. I mean, it's the most iconic cookie, really, anywhere.
It's like inventing the coat hanger.
Right? I mean, when you get a cookies, it doesn't matter what brand it is, but if it's that sandwich cookie, right? I don't care if it's generic or whatever, you call Oreos.
Well, there's other weird facts. Okay. So one, they're available in 100 countries, which I thought that's pretty amazing.
That is.
But then all the flavors I started researching, because I've personally never noticed that they ever even had any other flavors, but apparently they release like a new flavor.
Oh, yeah. They have a golden.
Wednesday. Every Wednesday, a new flavor comes out. Now,
Yep.
I don't know where they put them or who can get them, but.
Yeah, who they're released to.
How many calories, Joel, do you think there's in one cookie?
Oh, see, now this is the bad part about it right here.
So you're trying to lose weight. How many calories are in a cookie?
I would bet you one cookie probably has at least 50 calories.
Pretty good, 45.
Yeah, I was close.
Pretty darn good.
Yeah, because there's a lot of ingredients in there.
Well, they used to also say it had a cream filling. Well, then the FDA came in and said, no, you can't spell it like cream, like the milk cream. You have to spell it CREME, cream.
Gotcha. I mean, I suppose because it's not really cream now, is it? It's lard.
Think of the court battle that happened that day.
Oh, I would imagine there was a big battle because that would mean having to basically rebrand it with a different spelling.
So the other thing I found out, they have a 6-person team that is in charge of these special flavors. And this team is so secretive, nobody even knows who they are or the group's name.
How would you like to be part of that team?
Well, now that I broke the ice on eating one of the damn things.
Sure, that'd be... Where you get to be the product tester.
Sure.
You're like, ooh.
Yeah, you'd come out with flavors like moose meat, penguin beak.
Yeah, but they need to release a Bigfoot Oreo.
Oh my God! They probably they've even had like root beer float, cookie dough, fruit punch, strawberries and cream, watermelon. Imagine eating a watermelon Oreo, lemon twist, birthday cake, red velvet, key lime pie, cinnamon buns, s'mores, fruity crisp, blueberry pie, Swedish fish, Peeps, waffles.
Well, Swedish fish is that candy. You know that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
okay.
I know they are. Those little gummy things.
Yeah.
But I could go on and on and on, all the past flavors.
But I don't think a lot of them make it to market.
No, they do. They make a few of them and they give them or sell them somewhere.
Yeah. I wonder.
Not where you live, Joel. You don't get any special flavors.
We're stuck with the two: the golden Oreo and then the chocolate Oreo, and that's really about it.
You probably get the moose meat flavored one.
Well, once a year.
Okay, but now back to the logo. So I did a little research, and apparently, the conspiracy theories. I got to get to this here.
There's probably lots of those.
Well, they say it's the Knights of Templar cross, known as the Cross of Lorraine, which was carried by the Knights of Templar. That's what the conspiracy people say. And of course, Nabisco said, well, it's the sign, it's the universal European sign of quality.
That makes more sense than the Knights Templar,
But it is a weird logo. I look at even the Nabisco logo, which it carries over to the Nabisco logo.
Yeah, because
it's a little weird. If somebody says, Doug, and I do logos, I create logos every week for people. And if I saw, got a job and they say make a logo for Nabisco, I ain't coming up with that damn design.
Yeah, but whoever did,
it's
genius.
I know it's memorable, but what the hell is it? It's just not very pretty to me.
Isn't that the point of the logo, though, is to be memorable?
I don't know. Sort of, but yeah, I don't know. Anyhow.
You know what I mean?
So there's a lot of this symbology on the cookie. It's very, there's a lot of people that do talk about it and discuss it. It's a lot of fan clubs, obviously based on Oreos and all the stuff. And I just thought, God, it's just weird. But the pattern is trademarked.
Yeah.
It's very complicated, very unique. And I literally had to print one out in black and white so I could really study it. It's quite detailed. It's quite interesting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but think of all the hours upon hours of research and development and resources that went into making, like I said earlier, that cookie.
Well,
it's iconic.
That cookie sells $2.9 billion worth in sales annually.
Really?
Yep. That's insane.
Wow.
40
Can you imagine having just a little bit of that?
They bake 40 billion every year of Oreos.
Jeez.
And
that is crazy.
But you know what's cool, though? If you think about, like, when they always talk about, we're going to spend $1 trillion on our infrastructure.
Yeah.
It gives you an idea how much $1 trillion is, right? Because since 1940 or 21, they haven't even made 1 trillion Oreos.
No.
And if
they haven't.
Only the amount of Oreos that I mentioned can go around the Earth 341 times, and they've only made 40 billion times since 1921. Oh my God! It's just $1 trillion is a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money.
Yeah.
No one's ever denied that. That they have made a lot of money off Oreos.
I think I just wrecked our radio show completely by
well,
so deep Oreos, but I thought it was interesting.
Well, it is interesting, and Oreos are what's an American institution.
Yeah, there you go. So we just talked about Oreos.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with talking about Oreos. I had no idea that there was so many different sides to an Oreo.
Yeah. So it's definitely got a lot
4
of
minutes left.
A lot of mystery behind it.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of mystery, but there's also a lot of everybody has a good memory of the Oreo. Most everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. Most everybody has a good memories with Oreos.
Yes, of course.
And I think the nostalgia factor is just as much responsible as the flavor for people that keep buying them.
But just think about what other cookie could you name that's so secretive and so powerful?
Right?
There's it's the holy grail of cookies.
Mm-hmm.
It's got kind of a holy grail kind of.
I mean, the only other one that might have the Oreo beat would be like homemade chocolate chip cookies. As far as having the trigger in your mind of happiness and good times, stuff like that.
Right.
And, because everybody's mom and grandma made those.
That's true. That's true. So, speaking of cooking, did you see the incredible, horrible fires that went through at 100 miles an hour in Boulder area? It was unbelievable, Joe.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
We're watching
it flash burn that quick.
Yeah, people were watching it real time and just going, "What the heck?"
That is just insane.
100-mile-an-hour winds were pushing that.
Right.
Oof.
It's scary.
Yeah,
Mother Nature is not happy lately.
No.
Come on, when's the last tornadoes in December?
Yeah, they ended up. I think they confirmed like 15 or so.
Yeah.
In Minnesota. That's weird.
Which is nuts because we're not even really known for tornadoes that much. I mean, we do get them, if we were wrong, but not that many. And then to have some in December.
Yeah, I mean, we normally have those in May and June. And July, and not in December. That was really, really weird.
That was really, really odd. It's scary at the same time. I remember we were on the air that night.
That reminds me, I have to get, I know some people who study weather control.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are friends, and I've known some of them quite a long time. I've got to get one of them on to discuss how easy it would be to manipulate the weather. And, you know, how the governments apparently do it. And we've all known about cloud seeding for rain. That's been going on.
Oh, yeah. They've been doing that forever, though.
Forever, the 50s.
You know, so that's not new. But HAARP would be the thing to talk about.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to get a meteorologist in to discuss chemtrails and discuss all these very interesting, weird things they see on radar. These, you know, weathermen do see weird stuff on radar that they.
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to get some.
How much goes unreported, you know?
You think that would be a good guest?
I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Okay, I'll do it.
I think it'd be very interesting to see what they have to say about weather modification and things that they experience, you know, especially when they're looking at radars and stuff like that.
Well, if you think about it, it really wouldn't take much. If you have the right conditions, you have a warm front and a cold front, all you got to do is maybe you probably couldn't cool the atmosphere, but I don't think it would be too hard to heat it up with microwave.
No, I don't think so either. Ooh, we got to get out of here, though. Wow, did that sneak up on us? So we learned a lot more about Oreos than we ever thought possible. We'll be right back. We got to go ahead. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Mike Clelland tonight, and we're going to be discussing, of course, UFOs and owls and the connection between the two. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. You know, set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer, throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joe Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hychek. Doug, we made it to the other side of the break, didn't we?
Yeah, that first half hour went by quick.
It went really, really quickly. Doug, you schooled us on the anatomy of an Oreo.
Well, somebody had to.
You know, that might sound boring to people that are just tuning in, but you need to go back and listen because Doug really, really schooled us on Oreos.
Yeah, considering I haven't had one in 30 years.
It's like you fell in love all over again, isn't it, Doug?
No,
when you ate that Oreo. You ate that Oreo?
Love, hate.
Reunited. That whole thing. But anyhow, I digress. We have a great guest on tonight. Our amazing guest tonight is author Mike Clelland tonight, he will be discussing an amazing connection of owls as messengers and the UFO abduction phenomena. Mike Clelland's 2015 book, Messengers, was met with high praise. In it, he explores the mysterious connection between owls and then synchronicities and UFO abduction. It was his first-hand experience with these elusive... wow, man, I'm reading this in its entirety the first time. You're an experiencer on top of it, Mike. That is going to be very, very cool and very, very interesting to hear, by the way. Let me get back into this. He's an experiencer of these elusive events that have been the foundation of his research. The book is also a personal memoir and journey of self-discovery. Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mike.
My honor. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's, we were talking a little bit in the first half hour. And Doug, of course, he shared a great story about the owl UFO connection. He had some personal from his family, what they had witnessed. And I know, kind of jumping into it, what got you into the UFO stuff and the owl stuff? What was that tipping point for you?
Ooh, so I'll try to tell this a little quick because to tell this, fully would take a half hour or so. So I'll try to, give you the Cliff Notes version.
Socks are the #1 most requested item in homeless shelters. Underwear is the second, shirts are third. At Bombas, socks were first, made with comfortable details for everyday wearing. Then underwear and shirts too, all designed to perfectly fit. At Bombas, every item you purchase means you're donating an essential clothing item to someone in need. One comfortable clothing item for you, one donated to someone in need. Bombas, comfort for all. Get 20% off your purchase at bombas.com/comfy.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors, presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
When I was 44 years old, there was a point in my life when I had been reading UFO books, and I kind of took a really strong interest in these books, and it was just kind of a turn in my life where all of a sudden I found myself really drawn to these books. And also in my youth, I had a handful of experiences. I had a close-up UFO sighting. I had a missing time experience that involved a bright light in the sky, and that was walking home from a high school football game. Both the UFO sighting and the missing time event happened when I was 12 years old. So that would have been 1974. And then in 1993, I had a really powerful experience where I woke up in the middle of the night and I sat up in my bed and there was a bright light pouring through the window. This would have been in Maine. I was living in Maine at the time. And middle of the night in the winter of 92, 93, I think it was January or February of 1993. And I sat up in bed and I was looking out the window and there was a bright light in the yard. And in walking towards the house were 5 of what we would even call the gray aliens, the skinny aliens with the big black eyes and the great big bald heads. And I should have been terrified. And I just had this very calm sensation. I heard a voice in my head that said, "Oh yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down." And that's exactly what I did. And I dismissed it all as a dream. I never took it seriously, but it kind of stuck with me. Now, fast forward to around, it would have been 2006. I was 44 years old. I was living in Idaho, right next to Grand Teton National Park, which is right next to Yellowstone. So a beautiful part of the planet. And I was doing all kinds of camping. I was working for an outdoor school teaching camping. And I met this woman, complete stranger, and she had been I had been up in Alaska teaching camping all summer, and I was back down. It was October. And I said, "Oh, you've been here all summer. You must have camped a lot." And she said, "No, I haven't camped once." I'm like, "That's terrible. It's terrible. This is a beautiful place to camp. You should." So I took her camping. And while out camping, as the sun was setting, on the one night, we just went out for one night. And actually, you know what? It was, we checked the weather. It was going to be perfectly clear weather. We didn't bring a tent. Our plan was just to sleep out under the stars. So we hiked into Grand Teton National Park, and I was totally in my element. I'd been working all summer, and so I was cooking on a little camp stove sitting in a big flat rock, and we were having a conversation, and the conversation got really deep. It got to this point where it was like I just was impressed. Like, this woman, her name is Kristen. I was like, I didn't expect this depth to her. Now, she was talking about her most heartfelt definition of what God meant to her. And at that moment, an owl flew over us. And then a second owl, and then a third owl. And for the next hour and a half, as the sun set, these owls flew around us, and they landed near us, and they landed on branches near us. And when we set our sleeping bags out under the stars, this is like beautiful high elevation Rocky Mountain terrain. The stars were magnificent. So you're laying on your back and you're looking up at the stars, and these owls would swoop over our faces and blot out the stars for just a microsecond. And it was this powerful, magical experience. So we went camping. After that, it was super cool. Wow, that was awesome. And 4 nights later, we went camping again in a totally different part of the mountains. And as the sun set, the exact same thing happened. 3 owls flew above us, but this time they flew really close. And this time they landed right at our feet. And we were both just astonished. I can just so clearly see the expression on her face right now, of how thunderstruck both of us were. Now, to have it happen once was pretty cool, right? So, but to have it happen twice kind of flipped me out.
Yeah.
No, here, let me add one little detail, which I did not talk about then, but I'm talking about it now. When we saw those owls, both times I had this voice in my head, and it might have been my own voice. It might have been some part of myself, but there was a voice in my head that said, "This has something to do with the UFOs." Right? So I was at a point, I was denying all these experiences in my life. I saw some owls in the mountains. Powerful experience. And a voice said, "This has something to do with UFOs." So from that point on, I kind of went a little crazy, and I started talking to people and researching myself, basically. I reached out to UFO researchers and told the experiences I had in my youth. And then I also started asking, I met with a lot of other people, and I would always ask the same question: have you ever had any odd experiences with owls? And what surprised me is It wasn't everyone, but it was enough that there was an unbelievable pattern. And I would ask the question of someone who has had UFO contact experience or a close-up UFO sighting.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask, have you ever had an odd experience with an owl or owls? And they would say, no one has ever asked me that question before. I have the weirdest story. And they would tell me this story, and they were so strange. And then I started hearing one after another, and I started archiving them, and I started making notes, and I started collecting them, and I started documenting them. And so that was really around 2009 when I got serious about archiving and documenting this stuff. So that's 12 years ago now. So for the last dozen years, I feel like I've been, it's not quite full-time. Sometimes it feels like full-time work. I have been collecting, archiving, documenting, and writing about owls and UFOs. And it stretches over to synchronicities, and it stretches over to other powerful human experiences, particularly death and owls. There's a really strong connection there. So, but I've been collecting these stories and trying to put them out there in the form of books, and I've been really open to talking on radio shows and podcasts and just trying to share this information. So if anyone out there has had a powerful experience with an owl, wow, I would love to hear it. So,
jeez.
Very cool. So one of the first things I noticed in your story is one thing nobody ever says, I saw a flock of owls. Owls are very solitary animals.
For the most part, yes. For the most part, they are. When they're young, like young owls can hang out together.
Sure.
So, and it's common to see two owls. Often two owls are vying for territory. Mm-hmm. But, and then young owls, if you see a group of owls, they are usually from the same family. They were all hatched at the same time.
Yeah.
And but there are these odd stories. There's a story, I think it's from either Wisconsin or Minnesota, and there's a newspaper article I found it online where there were like 2,000 owls like descended on this town. And then I have another set of photographs that a fellow in Missouri took. And he said there were over 200 owls in this field, and he took some pictures. And one picture shows 28 owls all lined up on a fence. So, and no one really has a good answer why that happens, but that every once in a while happens.
That is neat. Crazy.
That is very rare, though, but it does happen.
Yeah. Jeez, 2,000 owls. Wow. Man, but then you're witnessing these owls, and then what do you think now? I mean, your own thoughts, your own theory, the connection between the two, the UFOs and owls. Where do you think the connection lies?
Okay, so my sense is, well, here, let me just tell you, this is totally the common story. This is the story I get all the time. And so one fellow, this is one of the very early stories I've gotten. I've heard this story repeated over and over and over again. So this guy, Derek, gets a hold of me and said, I have this interesting story to share. So he was camping in the desert, and him and his friend, and they looked up on this cactus, and the sun was down, and they had a little campfire going, and there's this owl staring down at them. And they both got this kind of odd, unnerved. They were unnerved. It was a kind of an eerie sensation to have this owl staring at them. And the owl flew off. And then moments later, a triangle-shaped UFO, a craft, flew over them. And I talked to this fellow, Derek, and he struggled to articulate how weird the motions of this craft was. He said this was not a normal aircraft, and it flew absolutely silently. And then a few days later, he's had a second UFO sighting. And now I'll add this set of details. So he went on to tell me some other things in his life, and he had like these powerful dreams and powerful synchronicities and other odd experiences. And then he just kind of added in, kind of linking back to this owl sighting. So my life kind of changed directions at that chapter of my life. And then he said, I had a spiritual awakening. So that story, that's like the baseline story, and it has the owl, the UFO, and then it also has synchronicities, and then it has like a spiritual awakening. Now, not every story has every component like that, but that's what's surfacing in my research. And your question was, what is my thought about it? Now, I would argue that there's a rich mythological tradition, I can talk about that if you want, of owls in human folklore all over the world. And so owls seem to play this role all over the world. So where they show up in folklore and myth. They show up in Shakespeare. They show up in scary movies even now. They sort of punctuate like a spooky moment in a movie, right? So a little kid's like walking through a forest at night, and it's kind of meant to be a spooky movie, and there'll be an owl hooting. There'll be a sound effect of an owl hooting. That's not a mystery. That's just how, that's like, if you want to create an eerie mood, you just plug in a little owl sound effect. And so you're punctuating the movie for effect with an owl. Now, people's real lives are punctuated with owl sightings. So I would argue that people have been having these kinds of powerful owl experiences, not necessarily with UFOs all throughout history, but I would argue at powerful points in their life, life-changing points in their lives.
Very interesting. Did you notice weird things before the owl incident? I mean, was your life totally changed when you had that incident and you were looking for answers? Or have you always been looking for answers, Mike?
Well, I would say that I feel like I've always been a little bit of a seeker in that sense. And that's a nice word, like a seeker. And I actually end up using that word a lot, to describe the people who have these experiences. Very often they're seekers, So I feel like but what happened after the owl sighting or that sighting in the mountains with Kristen in 2004. After that sighting, I took my UFO experiences seriously, right? So I didn't see a UFO that night. I saw owls, but I had a message in my mind that said this has something to do with UFOs. I started taking my own UFO sightings very seriously, and I sought out researchers and sought out people to talk to, and in the intervening years, I've had more experiences. So I would argue that after the owl sightings, my life changed completely. My life took a dramatic, sharp turn. And I would say my old life in many ways fell away, and this new life emerged where I was somewhat obsessively researching owls and their connection. I'm as the years go on, like that book came out in 2015, which is 6 years ago now, and or 7 really, I'm less locked into the UFO thing, and the term I use now is highly charged human experience, which a UFO sighting would be, right? Yeah. So I would say that owls are connected to highly charged human experiences, and that can certainly include UFO sightings.
So would it be safe to say then owls are heavily connected to the paranormal, to some really mind-changing, mind-bending experience?
That would be fair. Now, there's some things that I haven't made the connection with. I've tried a little bit. Like, for instance, hauntings. People going to hauntings will often have owl sightings. I've talked to Bigfoot researchers, and they kind of say, like, not many people talk about this in the Bigfoot community, but there's oftentimes owls associated with Bigfoot sightings. Yep. And UFO sightings, and people who have UFO contact experiences, like people who are repeat abductees, right? They get abducted, and they'll, if you talk to these people, they'll say, "Oh God, it was that day. I knew something was going to happen that night. I just knew it. I knew something was going to happen that night. And as I came home that night, there was an owl on the branch right by my door when I came home, and that just told me something was going to happen that night. And then, sure enough, I had an abduction experience. Now I've heard that story in one form or another many, many times. So yes, an owl can be used as a marker to, now is it the aliens who send it in? I don't have an answer to these questions. Is it connected to the UFO, or is it simply connected to the highly charged human experience? Because people have owl sightings before a death in the family, most often after a death in the family. I've collected a lot of powerful stories of owls showing up after someone dies.
Yeah. So the paranormal and the owl, and when I say paranormal, I mean, broadly speaking, the paranormal. It seems that there is a connection between the paranormal and owls, all facets of the paranormal.
Many facets, yeah. So I'm not well versed in all facets of the paranormal. Like people having seances, would they have a owl sighting before a seance? I don't have an answer to that one, but certainly in connection with. So here's the list would be, and I should be able to do this off the top of my head. UFOs, death, around the time of death, usually after a death of a loved one, Meditation. I have a lot of stories of owls showing up after meditation. Literally people opening their eyes and having an owl staring at them, either through a window or if they're meditating in the woods, the owl will be staring right at them. I've got a handful of stories like that. I've got a few stories of owls showing up as people are preparing to commit suicide. And then they see the owl as a sign not to commit suicide.
Yeah.
So, and then owls in association with taking psychedelics. So like almost not psychedelics in like a party down kind of way.
Yeah.
But more like a ritual setting, and an owl showing up as like a totem animal or a spirit animal.
Yeah.
So I think that's right.
So would you call that night with you and the owls and your partner, that the person you were camping with, that was your awakening, wasn't it? That was
that was certainly my
switch
awakening
was flipped.
to this. That's as good a way as putting it. And I didn't flip the switch, right? Like I didn't go into the mountains expecting a switch to be flipped, and it would have. And no doubt about it, that night or after the second event, like my life was, because I knew that was weird. I talked to owl biologists. There's a raptor center, and they have biologists that work there near the town I was living in. I went in and talked to the biologist, and I said, "Here's what happened to me." And that guy looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm like out of the norm, because he's like, nope, doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
That's just not the way they roll.
Have you ever heard the theory, Mike, about owls being implanted in people's memories as a false memory to cover up an alien abduction? I remember that's one of the first things I ever heard. Maybe 20 years ago, I'd heard that.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
And is that possible? That's what happened to you? I'm just throwing it out there. Is that crossed your mind?
So the woman I was with has the exact same memory as me, and these owls were about 11 inches tall. Okay. They flew around like owls. They landed at our feet like owls. We were in a place where you could see owls. So in my opinion, highly unlikely. In fact, I was well versed in the UFO lore. I was staring at these owls thinking, are you a screen memory? Are you a screen? You sure look like a real owl, but are you a screen memory?
But the fact that somebody came up with that theory is still interesting, because it still connects owls with UFOs.
Yeah, and so in the book, The Messengers, my first book on owls, very early on in the book, I discussed that the screen memory. That's what's used in the lore, right? So people who do there's people out there doing full-time investigation into people who have had abduction experiences. So within the abduction lore, owls are well understood to be screen memories. So a very common story, and now let me tell you, my files are just overflowing with this story. Somebody's driving home, it's late at night, there's a big owl in the road. It's big enough, they pull up to it, it's standing in the road, it's looking over the hood of their car. Now, I don't care, you got the smallest car in the world and the biggest owl in the world, that ain't going to be able to look over the hood of your car. So they're not that big. So they're describing something that is very unusual. And then maybe that flies off, and then they get home, and then when they get home, they're like, wait a minute, I was supposed to be home at midnight, and it's 3 a.m. I lived 3 hours of time. I'm missing 3 hours of time. Doesn't make sense. That story is extremely common. Now, I have a close friend. She has had a lot of UFO contact experiences. She recognizes and understands and calls herself an abductee, and has had these experiences all throughout her life. But when she was 19 years old, she was working at a girls' camp, doing camping trips in the mountains in the Northwest, actually pretty close to where I am here. And she knew she was having experiences with alien beings in her life. And she was walking between 2 campsites in the backcountry, in the mountains, with these girls all camped. And she was, there was like a little trail between the 2 campsites, and she could hear the girls like laughing and playing at one campsite. And she was walking on this path, and as she turned a corner, there was a gray alien standing in, like, next to the path, full daylight.
Oh boy.
And she looks at this thing, and it looks at her, and she's a really good storyteller. She's really funny. So she looks at this thing, and it looks at her, and she basically says, this thing gave her the expression of like, uh-oh, like, you weren't supposed to see me. and the communication that happens between like what would be the gray aliens, right? The beings with the bald heads and the big black eyes.
Yeah.
Almost universally in the literature, they don't talk and move their mouths. It's all their communication is telepathic.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she had this like reverberating echo that like made it into her consciousness, like they were sharing the same thought. And she heard this like alarm go off that went owl, 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 owl. And she watched this gray alien morph into a giant owl, and the owl turned around and walked into the woods.
If you're a general contractor, a subcontractor, or an owner, you want your jobs to be on time and on budget. And that means working with Autodesk Construction Cloud, software that lets your team design, plan, build, and operate from office to field. It means getting end-to-end solutions, seeing project data in real time, and preventing problems before they happen. Trusted on over 2 million construction jobs around the world. Build with Autodesk Construction Cloud. Try it free today at construction.autodesk.com.
Whoa.
So we have there's a story where someone actually saw like so the implication is that if and I've talked to UFO researchers, I've talked to Bud Hopkins, I've talked to Dave Jacobs, I've talked to people who are doing this kind of research, and I said, so what does the owl mean? And they'll say, the owls sort of look like a gray alien, right? They got the big black eyes. If you see them at night, so if you saw an owl on the side of the road, well, that's unusual, but it doesn't, it's not impossible. If you saw a gray alien standing on the side of the road, well, wow, that's something totally different, right? That's something that should throw you into a panic attack. So the implication is that the gray beings, I've heard no other cases of like other kinds of beings showing up. It's always the gray aliens that seem to be mimicking the owl, and it's as if they're putting a hypnotic vision into the mind, so they're projecting a psychic image into the mind of the observer. Now, it's not just owls. Deer show up a lot, and like other things like clowns and firemen and raccoons, and so all these other things show up in the consciousness of people, and that later turns out to be one could surmise it's a gray alien. Yeah. And oftentimes under hypnosis, the people will say, I'm looking at an owl in the road, and the hypnotherapist will say, describe the owl. And the person under hypnosis will say, well, it's got big black eyes, and it's tall and skinny, and it's got a shiny spacesuit on, it's got a big bald head, and I don't think this is an owl. So, so that's very common. And what I tried to do in my research is address that, and then move on and study the more mystical aspects of these owl sightings.
Yeah, right.
Very interesting. Wow. Have you met anybody who had an extreme fear of owls, or where they'll see an owl?
Oh yeah.
And they freak out, like just really freak out.
Well, maybe not really freak out, but I certainly know some people who have a fear of owls.
For children, yeah. I was at a state fair one time, and there was a painting of a frog, a friendly-looking frog, and my 4-year-old daughter saw that, and of course the frog had the big black eyes. I'd never seen her get hysterical like that, and I had to run out of the fairgrounds with her from just seeing that. It just triggered something. And I've just wondered if, that you've ever heard any stories.
Oh, I've heard that many times with owls, yeah. So.
Yeah. Very interesting. So, one thing I wanted Mike to say is, or to tell us that, one, you're an amazing artist, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
You're also an amazing outdoorsman that, we haven't really got into. But, I would say you're basically a professional outdoorsman. Because
I would qualify as a professional outdoorsman. Yeah, I get paid for it, so that makes me a professional.
Write books, you do videos, how to and backpacking. I just want people to know that. So when they're hearing your stories, you are a pretty successful, brilliant man. This isn't something that you're just some nut. You know what I mean?
Well, sometimes I worry I'm some nut. I've definitely got obsessed about this. But yeah, so I was doing a lot of outdoor work for 20 plus years. I still do a lot of personal stuff. I haven't worked I'm almost 60 now, so I've worked less in the outdoors in the last few years than I had for the last, previous 20. But and then the illustration work took up a lot of my time. That was my main job from the time I was about 16. So.
Yeah,
and then I would say the book writing the books was a creative process, and I tried to make it I tried to make the books good, and I tried to be very creative as far as the storytelling in those books, and try to, when I wrote those books, this is how I'll put it. When I wrote those books, I wrote the books that I wanted to read, the kind of books that I would want to read. So,
have you noticed any patterns in people who are awake? That's what I always consider it. People who are awake, people who notice things, they see UFOs. They're looking in the sky. They want answers. They're curious about things. Is there a pattern that you can, that you've noticed in all your investigations?
So I'm on my website, and when I do these things, I say, if you've had an owl experience and that's weird, I want to hear it. So I'm looking at this narrow, thin band of people who have had experiences. The people who have owl experiences in UFOs or owls and synchronicity or owls and death, those are the people who are contacting me. So I'm not looking at a big wide spectrum. I'm looking at a very, very narrow spectrum. And so there is one of the things I would say is the people who are having these experiences with owls in its connection to either the paranormal or synchronicities or death, they are not 100%, but there's certainly a pattern where they are healers. They're working as nurses or family therapists or psychiatrists or, actually, this is what, so here, I talk to people all the time about this stuff. They send me a note. I'll say, hey, let's talk on the phone. I talk on the phone a lot. And when I talk on the phone, I have a pen, I have a clipboard. I don't write down much. I write the date and their phone number and their email address and a few quick notes, and I keep all that on file. But on the corner of that page, I write Reiki. You familiar with Reiki therapy?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just wait.
Yeah, it's that vibrational healing.
Yeah. So I just wait, and I say, so what do you do for work? And they say, I'm a Reiki therapist.
Wow.
The number of people who are Reiki therapists and have had owl and UFO experiences is statistically off the charts. I would say that, and I haven't crunched the numbers, but I feel like I'm pretty safe saying this, that 50% or more of the people who contact me are Reiki therapists. And that, I know that cross-section of the population, 50% of the cross-section of the population is not a practicing Reiki therapist. So something is going on.
Interesting. What about abductees? Is there a pattern that you've noticed that people like Dr. Jacobs don't ever mention? Those guys never mention patterns in the people they see.
So there's a few patterns so one is that there's a wide cross section. So one sense is there's no pattern at all, right? It takes all forms of people. It takes bankers and artists and musicians and truck drivers and taxi drivers and so it is just and so there's So a few things that I've noticed. So people who have had the contact experience, not 100%, will often be like their level of success in life isn't like they're like, you meet these people, they're articulate, they're skilled, but they're not as successful as you think they should be. They're just a notch down as far as like they just feel a little bit like they're outsiders, a little bit. And also people are prone to I'm very cautious to say this, but I've met a lot of people who have had depression, who've had these experiences, which if you think that they've had some sort of traumatic experience in their life, you should expect that depression or some sort of anxiety would show up in their life. So those are the patterns I see in the larger cross-section of people who have had abduction experiences. And that's pretty loosey-goosey. I'm not a clinician, I'm not a statistician, but that's just a sort of off-the-cuff sense. Yeah.
I was looking for new information because, so often I've listened, I'm sure I've listened to every lecture Dr. Jacobs has done and many Bud Hopkins. but you generally, I don't hear much about patterns of people, because they make a big point of saying there's no patterns. It's just it's everybody. It's the average Joe and I personally don't buy into it. What I buy into is there's certain people that seem to be awake, and they have these weird experiences. They'll be able to tell you 20 different paranormal stories, or some other guy will have never had anything happen.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what's the difference between you, Mike, and some other guy that just, doesn't notice anything?
So that's the chicken and the egg, which came first. So one thing, so there's a very, like, MUFON is a very conservative organization, right?
Right.
And in their checklist, right, they have a little field investigator checklist, and on that checklist, if you've had a close-up sighting, I think it's even close-up sighting. I'm doing this off from memory, not even like an abduction thing. Like, you don't have to have missing time, just a close-up sighting. Right in their field notes, they say, like, what day did it happen? What time of the, what time was it? They, like, very simple questions. And one of the questions is, have you noticed an uptick in psychic abilities? That's well understood in the research. The people who have had even a close-up UFO sighting will have an uptick in their psychic abilities will change. I talked to one person who well, actually, so there was two people that had a sighting together, and I talked to the woman. It was a woman and a man. The woman had been doing tarot readings with tarot cards, and she said her ability to do tarot readings after this UFO sighting, just an orange thing in the sky, just it kind of flew towards them and then poof, disappeared. But her ability to do tarot readings changed enormously. And this other guy said he could read people's minds, and it lasted for about a week, and it scared him. He did not like it. He would go to the bar, and he could read everyone's mind at the bar, and it freaked him out. It eventually faded away. But those kinds of experiences are well understood. So if someone has a UFO, so first of all, let's just say someone has a UFO sighting, right? So you are Joe Normal, you have a UFO sighting, you are instantly on the other side of that line where, everyone says, well, there's really no such thing as UFOs. I mean, kind of the New York Times is saying the opposite now, but, there's no such thing as UFOs. Don't believe that, but then you see it and have the firsthand experience, and you are forever changed. You are on the other side of the line. Like, reality, as I have been taught, by my parents, by my school, by my church, is not what it appears to be. And I have a living real experience so people, once they cross that, then they're open to lots more stuff. And I would think that would be a big part of it.
Well, you talk about synchronicities a lot. What I'd like you to kind of explain some of that, but is there a difference? And have you experienced also some really weird coincidences that really aren't those simple, quick synchronicities? You know what I mean? Can you just kind of get into some of the details on?
Okay, so I would before the UFO, excuse me, I called it a UFO sighting, before the owl sighting with Kristen, I had been plagued with synchronicities. I was having powerful, weird synchronicities. And then after the owl sighting with Kristen, they were off the charts. Like it felt like reality went crazy around me, and I was having the most powerful, overwhelming synchronicities, one after another, after another, after another, and I didn't know what to make of it. Like I actually worried I was going insane, and there were people around me that recognized them and saw them, and I would share them in the day they happened, and I would make notes, and I was keeping a diary, and I got all this stuff. I was keeping good notes, and then eventually I started a blog and putting this stuff online, and just these synchronicities. So let me just think of a good one. Okay, so this is kind of a light one in the sense. So doesn't have anything to do with owls, but I lived in a town, and I was working for the outdoor school, right? So I'm working for an outdoor school, spent tons of time outdoors, and I needed a sunblock. Now my skin is a little sensitive, so some sunblocks can almost sting my skin, right? So I needed a sensitive sunblock, and so I started asking around to people in my town, like, what is it? What's the sunblock I should use? And they all said the same thing. They said Neutrogena 45. So I'm like, okay. So I went to the little drugstore in my town and looked for Neutrogena 45. They didn't have it. And I went to the little health food store and they didn't have it. And then there was a grocery store. I was driving home from my town, very small town in Idaho. And I had checked the drugstore, to check the health food store. And it was a big grocery store, but I was kind of like, I don't feel like pulling the parking lot. I don't feel like doing it right now, so I'm not going to do it. But so I drove past the grocery store. And on the drive home, there were these big bags of trash outside on the side of the road. Right. So there's the annual springtime roadside cleanup. And some years I would help out and, pick up trash. So I get home and I live right along the highway. And I just didn't even go in the house. I just went right in the garage and grabbed a couple trash bags and put them in my pocket and started walking on the road. Now, where I lived, from my house, I could walk along the highway to the stop sign, which is exactly a half a mile away. So I could pick up trash for half a mile. I could cross the highway and then walk back a half a mile. So that's collectively a mile on one side and a half mile back. And I said, that's good enough. So that's pretty good. And then I started walking and I was picking up trash. It was pretty gross, right? And like old cigarette butts and stuff. And then it starts snowing, and then the snow turns into that ugly sleet and this kind of wet, ugly sleet rain combo. And it was really bad. Yeah. And I'm soaked. And I'm like, I should just turn around. I was like, well, I'm already soaked, right? So I'm just going to keep going. So the stop sign, I can see the stop sign, my turnaround point. I get to the stop sign. I kid you not, leaning against the stop sign, like someone had propped it up, leaning against the signpost of the stop sign, is a bottle of Neutrogena 45. So let's back engineer that one, right? So I'm 44 years old. This is right before the event with Kristen. Kristen's event happened in the fall. This happened in the spring.
Yeah.
So this is the lead up to this event with Kristen. 44 years old. I am it's a signpost. Like, wow, what a vocabulary word that is. I find this bottle of sunblock that I had been looking for at a signpost. So
that's crazy.
So I don't know what to make of it. So that's one of many hundreds of stories I could tell. That's just one I could tell quick. Some of them are very complex. So.
But don't you feel people should take heed when things like that happen? They should take responsibility and try to think about it. Notice it. Don't just
absolutely.
Don't brush it off. It's going to help you. It's going to guide you.
So the same could be said of a powerful owl sighting, right?
Sure.
Right? You should take notice of it. It's trying to guide you.
Yeah, but you did, and look what it did. It did a lot of good for your life, obviously.
Well, my bank account.
Other people.
Let's look at my bank account. We'll talk about that. I've been successful in all ways.
Not everything.
Except financially.
But it took you on a journey of meeting, God knows, thousands of people maybe.
Thousands of people have reached out to me,
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of amazing. And I've always, every time I've had some coincidence, I've always felt like you just don't forget about it. You think about it. What does it mean? Because I just, some of them are so far-fetched. Like the one you just told. It's got to be a meaning there. And
the stop sign, it's at a stop sign. I'm going to be turning 45 in a few months, so there's like all these things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, powerful.
So people should take responsibility and notice their coincidences and not blow them off. Would that be good advice or bad advice?
I would say, right? So it's oftentimes synchronicities aren't clear cut. Sometimes they're very clear. Very clear, the message. Very clear. So, but other times they're a little blurry. That was a little blurry, that one. And I have a friend, his name is Alan Green, and he does synchronicity research. He's put out some books on synchronicities. And he said something, and I've taken this to heart. I used to say synchronicities were like signs on a path, right? So you get on a path and you turn right or left. There's a little sign there waiting for you. So you get in your life path. You're like, ooh, do I make this decision or that decision? Some powerful synchronicity will show up and help you make that decision. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, that's not the right model. Synchronicity is more like a compass on the open ocean on a cloudy day, right? So if you don't have a compass, and now we have GPS and stuff, so this is kind of old-fashioned like symbolism. But if you don't have a compass, how do you proceed forward? So he says that's how he uses synchronicity, more like a compass rather than signs on the road.
Hey, Doug, after your encounter with, just hit me in the head, with the entity on the highway, the one, infamous one, did you have a owl experiences?
No, not that day.
Yeah, just curious if your own life, if you can kind of...
But the thing that swooped at the car was kind of like a giant owl, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was kind of thinking it's...
Oh, here,
so
I didn't hear the
strange.
story. Can you tell it to me? You might have just shared it earlier.
Oh, there was a couple of things. Yeah, I did a little bit, but basically my father was a kind of an animal. He would take road trips with us kids, and he would go a long ways without stopping. Pee break maybe, but just keep going. But he was driving with my mother and my two older brothers. I wasn't with. I wasn't born yet. And they were driving to the Black Hills, and he was on a mission to get to the Black Hills by morning, by sunup. And they were driving through the Black Hills about 4 a.m. And they see eyes at the side of the road. And where the eyes were, a rabbit ran across the road. And right where the rabbit was, an owl took off, clearly an owl. And right where the owl was...
Over 2 million construction jobs around the world are taking their projects to the next level. From roadways to railways, from skyscrapers to homes. Make your vision a reality. Build with Autodesk Construction Cloud. Try it free today at construction.autodesk.com.
A very strange object took off, actually collided with their car, broke the windshield, and went up, and they of course slammed the brakes on and watched it, got out of the car real quick, and watched it go up in the moonlight, this pinwheel type object on its side up into the heavens.
Well, pinwheel object on its side. Oh, keep going.
Yeah,
let's keep going.
Yeah. And so this was it would have been in the 50s, 55 probably, I believe.
Okay.
And of course, there wasn't much topic or talk about UFOs back then. There was very little, but it was on its side and went straight up vertically, and it was like it was weighted on one side. But the odd thing is what drove him crazy was what was the rabbit doing there with the owl and the UFO? They were all three there in that same exact little spot at the side of the road. And I heard that story, of course, when I was 5, Mike, and that certainly had an effect on me, because I would ask them to repeat that story every year. It just seemed so mysterious, and the fact it broke their windshield. It was very interesting. But what Joel was referring to is we were driving back on Highway 35 in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, and something just dropped out of the sky with these huge wings, which could have been a giant owl or God knows, but we're talking huge. And it dropped straight down as if air currents had no effect on its open wings. It dropped down like a spider on a web and then headed right for my windshield. And of course, when it got closer to the car, Yvette ducked, and then eventually I had to duck because we thought it was coming right through the windshield. And that's what you were referring to, Joel.
Yep, that was the story, yeah. Of that was a strange encounter.
Yeah. So here, let's just the first one. So the pinwheel on its side, it's an unknown object, right? So that's the definition of a flying saucer, right? Yes. Or a UFO, unidentified flying object. So it's perfect. You've got an owl and an unidentified flying object. Perfect. It's perfect. And then also, do you know what a Zen koan is?
No.
So a Zen koan is something that would, like a Zen master, like you go to the Zen monastery in Japan and you study under the master, you study under the teacher and the guru, and they will give you what is the sound of one hand clapping? That's a Zen koan. And you're supposed to meditate on this thing that's absurd, right? There is no sound of one hand clapping, and there can't be, right? Because it's so you meditate on this absurd thing, and I have come to see like these owl and UFO things like a Zen koan, like they don't have any meaning. but still we're forced to think about them. So that's exactly what happened, right? So the premise that the Zen teacher is trying to give the student is that your rational mind can only take you so far. You have to move past your rational mind somehow to this mystical part of your mind. And that's that, what is the rabbit doing there? What was on the side of the road? Why did it happen? You will never be able to answer that question.
No, of course.
But so that's exactly what a Zen koan is.
But it changed my life, that story.
And look what you're doing now. You're doing a paranormal podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is perfect. That's perfect. So yes, so I often ask, what happened before the event and what happened after the event. Now that event is 60 years or so ago, and so what have happened after that event is you're now doing this work. I'm filling in the blanks.
Oh, and it certainly
knowing a lot of the details, but that seems fair.
Yeah, and it certainly had an effect on everybody, I think, because it was so bizarre, But it's so weird too, like you said, it just doesn't make any sense.
So here I'll tell a little story. This has nothing to do with UFO, but everything to do with this weird aspect of the owls. So a guy works at a grocery store, and he's got this job, and he said, it's actually a pretty good job. I get up early and I wax the floors at the grocery store, and then they open this grocery store in the morning, and I'm done. Like, I'm done with work by the time the sun comes up. And it's so he's got a lot of time during his day, and so he said it's a pretty nice job. But every day on the way to work at night, right, sun's down because he's going before the sun comes up, he stops at this little point in the highway, and he stands on the side of the road, gets out of his car and stands on the side of the road and prays to the heavens. He prays to the stars above. He said, basically saying, I want an answer. I want answers to what's going on in the universe. I need help. Right? So he does this day after day after day, same spot. And then he's driving one day and it's cold. I actually think he was from Wisconsin. No, I think he was from Massachusetts, and it's cold, 20 below zero. And he's like, I'm not getting out of the car today. I'm blowing this off. Yeah. And he looks ahead, and there's this, what he thought was a paper bag in the road. And he looks at it, and it, as he gets closer, this paper bag stands up and turns around and looks at him, and it's a little brown owl, and stares at him. But before he can do anything, bump up, he runs over it. And he gets out of his car. He stops the car, gets out of the car, and runs around, looks for this dead owl. And it felt like he squashed this thing. There's nothing. There's no feathers. There's no blood. He's running around back and forth. And he looks around, and you know where he was at? He was at exactly the spot where he would meditate every morning and ask this heavens for an answer. So he was like, I'm not stopping. It's cold out. I'm not stopping. And the reality said, oh, you're stopping. You're going to stop. So these are the kind of mysterious stories that I have always loved, right? I always loved the spooky campfire stories. I always loved these kind of stories. And now my life is immersed in exactly these kinds of stories. And that story that your father shared is perfect as far as that story would fit perfectly in my files as far as the strangeness of these stories.
Yeah.
It's just so many weird things that have the explanation is so bizarre that there's not even any sense trying to come up with one. It's, like you said, the single hand clapping. It's a perfect analogy. Do you think that there is any evil synchronicities or any evil forces at work, or are they all good? I mean, have you ever sensed anything that's good or evil when you're noticing synchronicities?
Well, I've certainly had people share stories with me that sound pretty dark.
Okay.
And oftentimes, so this is in the owls. A woman had a close-up owl sighting, and then later that day she found out her niece had committed suicide. So the owl didn't cause the suicide, but she felt they were connected, and she did not like owls. Wow, she did not like owls.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of experiences with UFOs. So she here's a person with a heightened level of awareness because of her UFO experiences, and has this owl sighting. And then later on that same day, she finds out her niece committed suicide, and she connected those two. I've had some stories where people felt like they were in the presence of something malevolent, and it happened in connection to their, at the same time they had an owl sighting. But I will say that overall, the vast majority of my research points to something, I wouldn't say positive or benevolent, but I would say it's a life change, a point of life change, and oftentimes not an easy change. Like the owl is not a light and fluffy totem. Like an owl is a tough. If you get an owl symbol or an owl sign, people see owls all the time, but if you get an owl at a highly charged moment, it's announcing a challenging event in your life. And a challenge doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Here, I'll tell a quick story. Woman she has a dog, and she walks her dog a lot, and she's actually living, again, here in the Northwest, and she was living near the saltwater in one of the inland bays, and she would take her dog on the walk on this jetty that went out, but it was pouring down rain, and the dog, she said, I'll take the dog for a walk. And she's walking in the rain. It's like, what am I doing? I never walk the dog in the rain. She walks to the jetty where she always walks, this stone jetty that goes way out. There's a path on it. And she gets about halfway out and she says, what am I doing? This is a miserable day. Yeah. I'm going to turn around. So she turns around, and right as she turns around, there's a giant owl standing right behind her. So she turns around and faces this owl. Now her dog is very high strung. And her dog, she said, my dog would normally like go bananas if it saw like a big bird. Like they would chase it and bark but the dog sat down. And she said it sat down as if it was confronting royalty. Now, now let me just say something in the lead up to this. This woman had UFO contact experiences. She had abduction experiences in her life. And she was living in this town, and she was working with a therapist, and she was going to these support group meetings, and she was scared and troubled, and she's had this sighting with an owl. She stared at it for a little while, and she felt this incredible presence, and the owl flew off. And a few days later, she had a pain in her arm, and I think it was her arm or her shoulder. I think it was her shoulder. And she went to a doctor, and they did some tests, and she had cancer. She spent the next couple of years fighting the cancer. She went through traditional chemotherapy and traditional therapy, and she said, I went right to the line of death. I almost died, but the treatments worked, and I've been cancer-free for over 15 years now.
Wow.
So I said, what does the owl mean? What do you think the owl means? She's like, I think the owl was a symbol, like your life is about to change. Get ready.
Yeah.
And then I asked the question, what was going on in your life before and what was going on in your life after? That's not a normal question for a UFO researcher to ask, but that's the question I ask because that's the pattern I'm seeing. People's lives change. So she has this powerful owl sighting in this right before her cancer diagnosis. And I said, what was going on beforehand? And she said, I was afraid of my own shadow. I was terrified of everything. And I said, what happened after? And after would mean the owl and the chemotherapy beating cancer. She said, I am afraid of nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the kind of story that I'm getting in some form or another. Stories that have that kind of emotional impact.
Super interesting.
Would messenger of things to come.
Would we be overstepping our bounds to ask you, Mike, to tell us about any, alien type experiences or anything weird that you'd like that you can share?
I'm like a faucet when you ask questions. So like you just turn them on. I'm totally content about this stuff.
Love to hear.
And I've been very open about it. Hey, how much time do you have? There's a question.
We have another half an hour.
Oh yeah, we've got lots of time yet.
Wow. Okay. So wow, there's a long story that is 3 separate stories that are all connected by a line and a map. And each story plays out like UFO contact. It sounds like, when you hear the story, it sounds like, wow, that sounds like you were abducted, and I got very little evidence that I was abducted. So one story, I was camping outside in a tent with my friend Natasha, and this was on May 10th.
Every year we say we'll wake up earlier, exercise more, really rest, and eat healthier. It's hard for us, but for dogs, not so much. Dogs are up at dawn, run for fun, sleep like champs, and they love eating fresh, healthy food every single meal. Give your dog another healthy habit. Real fresh food from the Farmer's Dog. Get 50% off your first box at thefarmersdog.com/listen.
May 10th, 2011. I'm doing this off the top of my head, and that's right, May 10th, 2011. And we were camping outside, 2010, May 10th, 2010. And we were camping outside, and this is just at a place where you park a car and stuff like that, a campground like that. And well, actually it wasn't. It was just on the side of the road. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and well, we both woke up simultaneously screaming. And then I said, I said, what's going on? What's going on? I'm a professional camper. Like, I got no problem sleeping in a tent. Like, I've had bears and moose and stuff like that around tent. I'm not scared of anything around a tent. And I would have never felt anything like this. I felt a sense of fear that was off the charts. And she describes it the same way. I called it irrational fear or synthetic fear. It was like nothing I've ever felt before. Same for her. She describes it the exact same way. We're experiencing simultaneously wake out of a dead sleep.
Yeah.
Irrational fear. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And then she says, I saw a face. And so then came this point where we're like total freak out, right? Adrenaline's pumping, and then with the snap of a finger, we're both asleep. Mm-hmm. And this is my memory. Now I'll front load this by saying, I don't think this really happened, but this is my memory. My next thought, my memory was like, click, we're asleep, and then I'm floating up out of the tent. I'm like floating like an elevator up feeling, like I'm in a sleeping bag, and I'm just floating upward, and I go right through the roof of the tent. But before I go through the roof of the tent, I look over, and there's a floating pizza pan shaped, like almost like piece of translucent glass floating in the tent, this round pizza pan shape with a single dot in the center. And I see this thing, and I float up through the tent, and the next thing I know, I'm in this white realm. And as I'm floating up, I say, I have to remember this. I have to remember this. I have to remember this. And I pass through the top of the tent, and I'm saying, am I on a table? Am I on a table? Am I on a table? And the next thing I know, I'm in this white realm, this magical white realm. It's not a room. It's not a flying saucer. There's nothing. It's just this magical, infinite white realm. And here's a weird little detail. I've told this story to people who research near-death experiences, and they go, oh yeah, the magical white realm. Oh, very common in near-death experiences. But this was nothing to do with that. This was in a tent. And then I'm in this realm. I'm saying, am I on a table? And then I hear Natasha's voice. Now, Natasha's German, and she's got a German accent. And she says, Mike, you're floating, with her German accent. And whoosh, I'm back in my sleeping bag. And now I don't think that's my memory. That's clearly my memory. I wrote it down in my diary entry the day after, but that's not. I don't think that's what happened. Now, the next morning, I'm like, Natasha, what happened last night? She said, I saw this face. I'm like, can you describe the face? And oh my gosh, to tell the story correctly, could go on and on and on, because there's one thing that connects to another thing. But so I said, where'd you see the face? And she points to this corner of the tent, and that's exactly where I saw the floating mandala. And there's more to this story, which just to tell it correctly we'd run out of time. So, and then I get up out of the tent, and I walk around. I'm like literally looking for a burn mark in the ground where a flying saucer landed. I didn't find one. And I took my shirt off later that day, and I had this long scratch that started at my left shoulder and went down to my belly button that looked like a single rose thorn or a single cat claw had dragged across my skin, just a thin little scratch. But when you looked at it very closely, it was actually a bunch of tiny blisters, like tiny, tiny fluid-filled blisters, one after another, like a tiny, tiny, tiny set of dotted line that made a straight line from my left shoulder to my belly button that was not a scratch at all, but tiny fluid-filled blisters. And couple days later, I took a shower and I was like washed off. There was no pain. It never bothered me. And I think I would have known if I had gotten scratched by a cactus or something. It was like I hadn't been walking around with my shirt off, so there would have been no way for it to scratch me like that. So it washed off. There was nothing. Now, in the lead up to this story, this is the more mystical part. I can tell this story better given I tell the story in some of my talks, and we arrived in the town and the brakes weren't working in my car, and so I had to take it into the shop, and the guy took it behind the counter or put it up on the lift in the back of the mechanic's place, and then he comes back out and he says, "I can't let you leave town or you'll die." And that happened in the lead up to this. And I said, whoa, what's wrong? He said, "Your brakes are going to fail. I can't So I was stuck in this town when I had this experience. Like we were trapped in this town and someone said, "I can't let you leave town or you'll die." And then right after this experience, we were in the Four Corners area in southern Colorado. And we went into the Navajo reservation in Arizona, and we had a sweat lodge with a local elder. And it was a really beautiful, powerful experience. So I had this experience where a guy says, "You can't leave town or you'll die." I had an experience of fear and terror in a tent. And then I had this shamanic ceremony of death and rebirth, which is what a sweat lodge is. Mm-hmm. And you enter the sweat lodge, you metaphorically die to the heat, and you are reborn as you exit the sweat lodge. So I had a ceremonial, symbolic experience of death and rebirth in connection. So this all happened within a little over 24 hours collectively. So that is so those outlying details are strange. Now that one story lined up with two other stories on a straight line in a map, and when I put those three accounts on a map and realized they made a perfectly straight line, and I put them on Google Maps and you could zoom in and it was like razor sharp. And there was, in the other story, there was a floating orb, again with Natasha, a different year. It was a floating orb and an owl. So the floating orb, Natasha saw a floating orb as I was listening to an owl. We were separated by just a few hundred yards. And she was on the walk down, and I was just at the camp, and I was listening to an owl, and she pulls up, and then she runs into she had just taken a walk, along the road in a pretty night, and she comes up and she said, "I just saw this floating orb. We got to get out of here." She was really scared, so we left. So simultaneous, I saw an owl, she saw a UFO. Floating orb qualifies as a UFO. And in the third spot, I was sleeping out under the stars alone. And this was March 13th, 2000 March 10th, 2013. I think I got the dates wrong there in this. So when I told you I told you the date incorrectly in the other one. And that night I was lying out under the stars and saw what I thought was a landed flying saucer on a hilltop. And I had a weird light near where I was lying. So I was looking at something that looked like a landed flying saucer. Yeah. And I have gone back to that site, and there is nothing on that hilltop. I mean, it would have been big. It would have been the size of a giant house. And there's nothing there. And I laid there all night staring at this thing, thinking like, now those three events lined up on a map. And two of the events were with Natasha, my friend Natasha, that happened 3 years in a row. Actually, 4 years in a row. There was a skip in one of the years. So, and then so two of the events were with Natasha, my good friend Natasha, and then one I was alone, and on the night I was alone was Natasha's birthday. So metaphorically, symbolically, she's connected to that story. I don't know what to make of these stories. So what that story did to me is confirmed my own UFO contact experience.
Right?
Even though there's it's very fleeting, there's no proof of anything, but for me, that confirmed it. The straight line in a map was the strangest part of it. Of those three events.
That's interesting.
Amazing.
Have you ever woken up with other marks on yourself, Mike, or was that the only time?
As a little kid, I had 3 dots on my left wrist, and they looked like little puncture marks. And I took I can't see them right now. I need glasses to see them. So I was 10 years old. I was in elementary school, school, so 10, 11, 12 years old, and I'm almost 60 now, and I can take a razor, shave the hair off my arm in that one little spot, and you got to kind of put it up to the light. But those 3 dots are still there, and they make a perfect triangle. Now that's not much, but I put that on my blog. It says 3 dots, triangle, left arm. And it's the most popular, it's a nothing little post. It has a picture of my wrist. And what happened is I've gotten more, by a factor of 2, more hits on that one post than anything else in 1,000 posts on a blog that's been around for 13 years or 13 years. Yeah. And so what that tells me is there's people all over the world Googling, like, what's up with this thing in my arm? I'm going to Google 3 dots, triangle, left wrist. And my site comes up. And then so I've gotten hundreds of people who have written me letters basically saying I have the same thing on my arm.
Jeez.
You have,
and it's not a like a vaccination scar or anything like that. Like how it doesn't look like that.
Do you have any memories, Mike, of any like gray aliens or any kind of aliens? Or
well, the memory I have of the beings that were outside my window in Maine. Oh yeah, that's full consciousness, and I dismissed it as a dream. But like, wow, like I never dreamed that I'm in bed looking out the window that exactly matches the window and exactly matches the yard. Like dreams are always a little mixed up, and they have their own kind of illogic to them or sort of surreality to it. This was not surreal at all. It felt totally real.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
I laid my head on the pillow and went back to sleep. Well, did I tell this story earlier?
No, we haven't heard this story.
Oh,
no.
This is so funny. I mean, I'm doing this thing. You know what I did? I did a podcast yesterday.
You're doing too many podcasts, Mike.
I know. I'm telling this. I told this. So when I was 12 years old, excuse me. Wow. When I was 30 years old, I was living alone in a house in Maine. And I apologize that I just told this story yesterday afternoon at almost the same time. So I was 30 years old. I was living in a house in Maine. I was living alone. And I was reading Bud Hopkins' book, Intruders. So I had a book that was filled with spooky imagery right next to me on the nightstand. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a bright light shining in the window. And I got up on my elbow, and I looked outside, and there were 5 gray aliens walking towards the house, and they were backlit by a bright light. Now that should be a scary image, right? Like 5 aliens like walking towards the house. I'm the only one in the house. It was like nobody. I'm like, the house is off in the woods, and I'm the only one there. And I felt nothing. I felt no emotion. I felt no fear. I felt nothing. I mean, I was not even curious. And I heard a voice in my head that said, "Oh yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and go to sleep." And that's exactly what I did. I just put my head on the pillow and click, I was out. I looked at this thing for maybe 20 seconds. Now, the next morning, I didn't even bother to go out to look and see if there were footprints in the snow. It just seemed absurd. And now, I would have been winter of 92, 93. And now, I was 30 years old. I don't know. I feel very strongly that something happened that night.
And how does anybody ever know?
Well, this is very difficult, right? So people want like quantifiable facts. They want proof. They want photographs. They want this. They want that. It's very tough, right? So I have in my other story, I have Natasha was a witness. She tells the story the same way. I have other accounts where 2 people see the same thing, me and someone else. So, but that I was all alone. It's just me. They can take my word for it or not. But what I can say for myself, I doubted it. And it was after the owls that I went back and revisited and really thought about that experience. And what was odd was there were synchronicities involved in that experience afterwards. And I mean, years afterwards that kind of pointed back to that experience. And I trust those synchronicities the same way I trust the connecting dot, the connecting line on a map more than I trust the individual experiences, the mysterious line on the map when I put those 3 events on a map. and saw that they lined up exactly.
Yeah.
I went right to, I'm good with maps. I can zoom in on the GPS location and I can pinpoint it on a satellite image exactly where I was sleeping in 3 different spots, and it lines up.
Well, that
laser.
Night you saw the lined up aliens walking towards the house, you should have done what my friend did. He had an experience similar to that, but he flipped the lampshade over upside down. So he would then wake up and then know whether he was sleeping or awake.
I didn't have the wherewithal to. I mean, that's a perfect thing, but I just didn't. It wasn't in me. I just had this voice in my head. What I can say was there was an eerie clarity to my vision, to my senses. There was an eerie silence to that night, and that was strange. And there was an eeriness to it that is very difficult to explain. And I talked to this woman one time, like a weird energy to the actual event, and it was like, I call it a hyper clarity. And I talked to this woman one time, and she had a close up. She was in the convertible on a street in L.A., and a flying saucer hovered down low over her car, and followed her, hovering right above her car. And she said, you know what it was like? There was this weird feeling. And when you take 2 magnets and they click together, right? And then you pull them apart and you rotate them a half a turn. You rotate them 90 degrees and try to push them together again, and they won't go together. They repel each other. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So when you try to press them, you look, there's nothing there to see, but they won't go together. And they have this kind of warbling energy. You're looking, there's nothing to see, but you can sense this kind of warbling, kind of irrational energy. You can feel that energy as you try to press them together. There's nothing to see. She said, you know what it was like being that close to a UFO? It was like being in between the magnets. And when she said that, I knew she and I had experienced the same exact sensation, because that is the perfect definition. So when I was sitting up in my bed on my elbow, looking out the window, it felt like I was between the magnets.
That's a weird description.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before.
And as far as someone who's felt it, that I knew in my bones that her and I had felt the same thing.
Oh. Is there one story that somebody has told you that just haunts the hell out of you?
Oh my God, I've got thousands. I mean, it's funny, that's tough. I've got a lot of stories. Some of them are tough to tell quick. How much time do we have?
Oh, we've got...
about 12 minutes left.
Yep.
Okay. This is one that has, so I'm content to, like, I'm almost happier not telling the stories that have to do with flying saucers. They're like almost better because they can kind of, you can kind of separate the UFO, because I got a lot of stories with owls and UFOs.
Oh, we're in campfire mode right now.
Yeah. So this story has the flavor and the mood of what I'm finding. This is a really good example of what I'm finding. A guy he has an apple orchard in his yard, and that's his family business. They grow apples. And so he has a back corner of the orchard where he meditates. So he goes out there and meditates before dinner. And as he's in quiet meditation, there's this screeching, horrible noise coming out of the woods. And the hair on the back of his neck stands up, and he's like, I'm freaked out. Like he said, every fiber in his body said, run away. And he said, no, I got to figure out what this is. So he walks into the woods and follows this screeching, awful noise. And there's a barred owl on a branch. And this barred owl is looking at him. And this barred owl is screeching and howling, and barred owls make a loud noise. They sound like chimpanzees in a Tarzan movie. And you can Google it and just listen to barred owl call. It's a weird, loud noise. So this thing stares at him, and he says he was looking at him with this mean expression. It was like chewing me out. Like, this owl was looking right in my eyes and chewing me out. And then the owl flew off, and he went back to his family, and he's like, his wife is making dinner, and he says, oh my God, I just had this profound experience in the woods back by the orchard there. I went out in the woods, and there was this noise, and this owl looked at me in the eyes and chewed me out, yelled at me. She's like, oh, that's nice, honey. Here, set the table for dinner. And he's like, oh, she doesn't get it. So he tells the kids, like, okay, like I was just in the woods, this owl that screeched at me. It was really weird. And the kids are like, Dad, like, so what? And he's like, oh. And he grabbed his camera and he went in the woods and he stood at the same spot and he said aloud, hey, my family doesn't believe me. I need a picture. This owl flies up, lands on a branch. He takes a picture. I use this picture in my talks. Beautiful picture of a barred owl on a branch. And this barred owl flies off. And after he tells this whole story, I'm like, what were you meditating on? He says, I was meditating. I put forth a question for that meditation. Is there really a God? And so he asks the universe, is there really a God? And the owl says, oh yeah? Like, how dare you? And chews him out.
Yeah.
I love that. So that's the story that has the logic of a dream as opposed to the logic of real life.
Yep.
Sure.
So what does it mean? I mean, I've had this happen to me. Like, I'll go a week. Every time I look at the clock, it's 11:11, or it's, look at this, 11. Everything's 11:11, but for a week, and then it goes away, and I don't think about it for 6 months, and then I'll start up again. What does that mean, Mike?
Well, I get 1, 2, 3, 4 a lot.
Oh, jeez.
12, 1, so what I get 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I pay attention to it. It's a synchronicity, right? I mean, maybe you could argue that your mind is like subconsciously like hyper aware and it can magically count the time on the clock. So it tells you subconsciously to turn your head right at that moment. But I don't know. Why does it show up on your when you buy 2 coffees and a muffin, it's the bill comes out to 11:11 or 12:34, why?
Just over and over.
Yeah. That shows up. You go to a UFO conference, you could turn to anyone at a UFO conference and say, hey, what's your number? And they'll look at you and they'll go, oh, my number's 1010. And then you turn to the next person and they'll go, oh, my number's 333. And everyone in the UFO community, whether they're a researcher or anyone, any seeker, I would go so far as to say any seeker, if you turn to them and say, what's your number? They without skipping a beat, they'll say 1111, 333, 1234, 1010, 222. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, what's the purpose?
Well, you're asking the big question, aren't you? Yeah. Like, if I told you, I would be making it up. So I could tell you anything. I would just, I would tell you not to believe me.
I wanted to see if you had any theories.
It's the same thing as it's pay attention. I think just pay attention. Something's out there.
I think, you know what? To me, what it does, it humbles me. It's kind of like a message that says, you don't know shit.
Well, that's the owl, like, screeching at the guy. Oh yeah, is there a God? You're like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And I have that story in one form or another over and over again. Like these kind of, I'm not at all churchy. I don't, God is a nice vocabulary word. I don't know what it means. Like but I recognize the power of that experience. Wow, as far as like asking a big question, like, is there a God? That's a big question to put forth in a meditation thing. It's not asking, should I buy a new car or something like that. It's way beyond that. So that's when the owl shows up. That's the power of the owl. It shows up at these highly charged moments. So I don't think the owl is inherently connected to the UFO. I think the owl is inherently connected to the highly charged moment.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think curiosity, just being extremely curious, triggers anything? Attention from the universe, UFO abduction, synchronicities, but just being curious, does that trigger anything?
I would say that if your intention, let's say the word intention. I think intention is a better word than curiosity. I think your intention can reflect back at you.
Okay.
Like so I talked to this one guy and I said, oh my God, I'm like getting all these synchronicities and all involve owls and UFOs, and I'm completely immersed, I'm obsessed with owls and UFOs, and I'm studying this guy. His name is Dr. Kirby Surprise. He wrote a wonderful book called Synchronicity. So he wrote a book on synchronicity, and he said, you are putting energy out. 2 highly charged things. UFOs are highly charged. Owls is a highly charged symbol. You're putting a lot of energy out there. You're projecting that energy out into the universe through your intention. You're asking for these stories. It should be no surprise that you're getting owl and UFO synchronicities in reflection. And he had a great phrase. Let me just that I love, and I use this. So he says, "We are all just parakeets in the birdcage, pecking away at the mirror, not realizing it's our own reflection." And that matches pretty well to my life in the sense like, oh my God, I'm pecking away at this mystery, owls and UFOs, but it's me. It's somehow I'm generating it. I'm making it reflect back. And fair enough, I'm like, I have a website at the top of my website. It says, I want to hear your owl stories, and I'm getting them. I'm getting the powerful stories. So I'm putting the energy out. It's getting reflected back, and I'm very curious. So my energy and intention is based on my own curiosity. So I would say yes, from my own personal experience.
So you're absolutely, though, convinced intention definitely plays a role in the outcome of life and luck and, success and failure.
But still, it can be, someone can say, I want a new car. I'm going to put out the intention. I want a car. And they can get a new car, like they'll win the lottery or they'll win a car. So this one story, like guy put out an intention. He wanted a new car, and this guy said, oh, let me just, like, my daughter, she moved, I got this car, I'm just going to give it to you. So he gets a car for free, for nothing. And he said it's the worst car he ever had. Everything about that car was a headache. So be careful what you wish for. Like, you may get exactly what you ask, but you might not get the, so you're
right. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's in the future. Yeah. Exactly.
I had a weird thing happen to me one time, Mike. Just as a gift, because I have a best friend, Joe, that's just like, he's one of those once in a 20 lifetimes best friend, right? And I thought, I'm gonna do something really nice for him, and I bought him a new Corvette. Wow. And bought him airline tickets to go pick it up. So he had to drive to go pick up this, or no, he had to fly and then pick up his Corvette. The day that he picked his Corvette up, I was at a casino because I had just done an interview. Somebody interviewed me for a podcast. I stopped at this casino for lunch, and I won a new car.
This is very normal. This is very normal. It's very normal that there was this. So the guy has a story. He's like, this is very normal. Guy has a story. He's totally broke. He's got $100 in the bank. He's like screw it. He wrote a check for $100 and gave it away to charity. And then goes to the mailbox and he gets a check that he didn't expect for $1,000.
Yeah.
So it came back to him by a factor of 10.
Exactly. Mine came back exactly what I spent on Joe.
I think this is normal. I think this happens more than anyone would dare guess.
Yeah. Well, the chances of me winning that car were probably 1 in 250 million, I think it was. And, we were only there because we were starving. It was the only restaurant. And I just thought, well, I'll just go and throw $5 in and won the car. But it was just weird that it was the day I bought my best friend a car.
I think this is, so I'm saying from my research, I'm saying these kinds of experiences, what you just described, are normal. They're not, it doesn't happen every day, but they are not unknown. They're not uncommon.
It's got to be controlled by some force. It's just.
And that's heartening to me. And it may be you. It may be like this is a little kind of Zen koan in a way, but we're all just parakeets in the cage, tapping away at the mirror, thinking it's not realizing it's our own reflection, So
wow.
You did it. You made it happen. I know.
Deep stuff.
I drank coffee. I drank good coffee just before.
Reminds me of the Pink Floyd song "Wish You Were Here." We're just two, in a fishbowl.
Two lost souls swimming in a fishbowl year after year.
Exactly. Yeah. But we only got 30 seconds left. Boy, did that go by quick, Mike. Gosh, darn it, man!
I know how busy you are.
Fast. Mike, why don't you tell
this has
people?
Been a great. I love talking about this stuff, and I love the chance to talk about this stuff publicly. So I have no problem.
Amazing stuff. Can you tell people your websites where they can get your book, all that kind of good stuff?
So I got 3 books out. You can go to my website, which is mikeclelland.com, and from that website, it'll take you to the books, to the audiobooks, to my blog, and if you can't remember mikeclelland.com, you can just Google UFOs, owls. I am the first thing that comes up, and then I'm about the next 25 things up below that.
And if they go to untoldradio.com, we put all of those links on our website too.
And they'll also be in the podcast description as well, all the links. So
great.
You'll be able to get it. Either way, you'll be able to find Mike. Again, Mike Clelland, everybody. Very interesting
this was
stuff.
super fun.
Thank you.
And I think we're just scratching that surface. Until next time, guys, take care of it, love each other, look out for those owls. My gosh, what a connection. Till next time, guys.
Rainforest destruction hurts our climate and wildlife, so technologist Topher White is measuring sound to monitor biodiversity and help prevent illegal deforestation. Hear his amazing story on Planet Visionaries, a new podcast from Rolex and the Washington Post, hosted by me, Alex Honnold. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're a general contractor, a subcontractor, or an owner, you want your jobs to be on time and on budget. And that means working with Autodesk Construction Cloud, software that lets your team design, plan, build, and operate from office to field. It means getting end-to-end solutions, seeing project data in real time, and preventing problems before they happen. Trusted on over 2 million construction jobs around the world. Build with Autodesk Construction Cloud. Try it free today at construction.autodesk.com.